Chijioke and Ifeoma had been married for 5 years. They lived in a modest home in the heart of the city, surrounded by the hustle and bustle of life, but their hearts were full of love. Chijioke was a businessman, ambitious and eager to expand his small company. His days were spent with clients and meetings, managing employees, and trying to grow his venture. Ifeoma, on the other hand, was a talented writer. She worked from home, using her words to paint beautiful pictures, creating stories that transported people to magical worlds. Together, they formed a strong bond. But in the shadows of their happy life, something was missing. Chijioke had always been proud of his role as the provider. He believed that a man's primary responsibility was to ensure the family's financial stability. His pride was built on the success he was carving for himself in his business. He'd always viewed Ifeoma's contributions as secondary, something she could handle because she didn't have to leave the house every day to work. He didn't mean to overlook her efforts, but somewhere along the way, he began to take them for granted. Ifeoma, on the other hand, had been a supportive wife. She understood Chijioke's dreams and ambitions. She knew how much he wanted to succeed, and so she put her own career aspirations aside to nurture their family and their home. Her work as a writer, though fulfilling in its own way, often seemed insignificant when compared to the pressures Chijioke faced at work. But, deep down, she was beginning to feel something she couldn't ignore anymore, a growing resentment, a sense that her contributions were being underappreciated. The days flowed by like this, with Chijioke immersed in his business, and Ifeoma managing the household. She woke up early, took care of the children, cleaned, cooked, and ensured everything ran smoothly. Chijioke, often coming home late, would barely notice the effort she had put in throughout the day. He would thank her for dinner, compliment the kids on their homework, but would never ask how her day had been. Slowly, Ifeoma began to feel the weight of everything. The weight of the housework, the weight of being a mother, the weight of keeping everything in place while Chijioke's life continued on without her ever being recognized. One evening, after a particularly stressful day, Ifeoma stood in front of the mirror. Her face was tired, her hair slightly unkempt, but her eyes burned with a quiet resolve. She was no longer willing to stay in the background. She had to make Chijioke understand. But the question was, how? The next day, Ifeoma decided to take a break, a real break. She had been working non-stop, day after day, without even a pause. Her body was tired, and her spirit was heavy. So, without warning, she told Chijioke, "I need some time for myself. I'm going to stay with my sister for a few days." At first, Chijioke didn't take her seriously. He dismissed it with a casual wave. "A break from what? We are all doing fine here, Ifeoma. You know there's no need to go away for a few days." But Ifeoma was serious. She packed her bag, kissed the kids goodbye, and walked out the door. Chijioke watched her leave, confused, but didn't stop her. It's probably just another one of her moods, he thought. She'll be back in a day or two. The house fell silent. For the first time in years, Chijioke was left alone with his thoughts, his work, and the kids. The first few hours were manageable. He focused on his work, making calls and attending meetings. But as the day wore on, things began to fall apart. The kids, who were used to Ifeoma's calm and nurturing presence, began to whine and complain. They missed their mother. Their routine, which had always been shaped by Ifeoma, was thrown into chaos. Chijioke didn't know what to do. He hadn't planned for this. He knew how to manage his business, but this was something else entirely. As the evening approached, he realized he hadn't prepared dinner. The kids were hungry, and he had no idea what to cook. He rummaged through the kitchen, trying to find something that would work. But the fridge was empty, and there were no pre-prepared meals to fall back on. He thought back to the countless times Ifeoma had made dinner effortlessly, turning simple ingredients into a feast. He had never once considered how much work went into every meal. The evening was filled with chaos. The kids wanted attention, the house was a mess, and Chijioke was overwhelmed. By the time the kids were finally asleep, Chijioke was exhausted. He sat in the living room, looking around at the house that felt too quiet, too empty. The laundry had piled up, the dishes were still in the sink, and there were toys scattered everywhere. He felt defeated. The night dragged on, and Chijioke couldn't escape the nagging feeling that something was wrong. He thought of Ifeoma, her soft voice guiding the children, her hands always busy in the kitchen, always tending to their needs. Her absence made everything feel like it was unraveling. He lay awake in the dark, listening to the silence, and the more he thought, the more he realized how much he had taken her for granted. The following morning was no different. Chijioke woke up to an empty house. The silence was louder than ever. The kids, usually so lively, were still asleep, and he sat in the kitchen, staring at the mess from the night before. It felt like a storm had passed through, leaving behind destruction. As the hours passed, he struggled to find a rhythm. Work, which he usually handled so effortlessly, felt like an added burden. The phone calls, the meetings, the paperwork, it was all there, but it was harder to focus without Ifeoma's reassuring presence. He tried to get things done, but distractions were everywhere. The kids needed his attention, and he couldn't remember the last time he'd actually spent time with them like this. By noon, Chijioke realized he had done nothing productive. The business calls piled up, the deadlines loomed, and the house was still a disaster. He found himself staring blankly at his phone, his thoughts drifting to Ifeoma. Where was she? What was she doing? Why had she left? Was this her way of showing him how much she contributed? Around mid-afternoon, Chijioke finally decided to call Ifeoma. His fingers hovered over the screen as he dialed her number. The phone rang twice before she picked up. Hello. Ifeoma's voice sounded calm, but there was an edge to it that he hadn't noticed before. Ifeoma, Chijioke began, his voice soft and apologetic. I've been thinking a lot since you left. I just wanted to check in. Are you okay? I'm fine, Chijioke, she replied, her tone distant. I'm just taking some time for myself. I needed it. Chijioke paused. I'm sorry. I didn't realize how much you do. I've been so focused on my work that I forgot to appreciate everything you do for this family. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Ifeoma spoke again. It's not just about what I do, Chijioke. It's about how I feel. I've been feeling invisible for a long time. You've been so busy with your business that you've forgotten to see me, to appreciate me. I need more than just your words. I need your time, your respect, and your love. Chijioke felt a lump form in his throat. It hit him hard. He had taken Ifeoma's presence, her support, and her love for granted. But now, it felt like he was losing her. The thought of not having her by his side, of not having a nurturing touch in their home, filled him with a deep fear he couldn't shake. Ifeoma, I promise I'll change. I'll make it right. Please come back, Chijioke pleaded, his voice filled with desperation. I'll come back when I'm ready, Ifeoma replied softly. But you need to understand that this isn't just about a few days away. It's about how we've been living for years. You have to show me you respect me, not just tell me. The call ended, and Chijioke sat in the living room, staring at the phone in his hand. His mind was racing. He couldn't imagine life without Ifeoma. He had always believed that he was the one holding everything together, but now he saw just how wrong he had been. Ifeoma was the heart of their home. She kept everything running smoothly, from the children's education to the meals on their table, to the love that filled their home. Without her, he was lost. Over the next few days, Chijioke tried to manage everything on his own. The business still demanded his attention, but now, he had to juggle it with parenting and keeping the house in order. The kids were becoming more difficult to manage without Ifeoma's coming influence. They missed her terribly, and they showed it by acting out, refusing to eat their meals, fighting over toys, and causing chaos wherever they went. Chijioke felt the weight of the responsibility pressed down on him. The laundry piled up, the dishes never seemed to get washed, and the kids were in need of constant attention. He was physically and emotionally drained. The once confident businessman was now a man at his wits' end. The idea of running a business while keeping up with the demands of his home felt impossible. And yet, there was no choice but to push through. On the fourth day, Chijioke received a call from Ifeoma. She had been checking in, and they talked briefly about the kids and the house. But this time, there was a different tone in her voice, a quiet, but firm resolve. "I will come back soon, Chijioke," she said. "But this is your chance to prove that you understand. Don't just fix things for a day, show me that you truly appreciate what I do. Show me that you respect my efforts, and that you value our family." Chijioke listened to her words carefully. He knew she was right. He had to prove that he could be more than just a provider. He needed to show Ifeoma that he respected her, that he saw all the small, unnoticed things she did every day. It wasn't enough to say the words, he had to live them. The next few days were a blur of activity for Chijioke. He worked harder than ever to get his business back on track. He managed the kids, cooked meals, cleaned the house, and did everything he could to restore some semblance of order. The exhaustion was unbearable, but there was no other choice. He couldn't let his family fall apart because of his pride. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Ifeoma returned. When she walked through the door, the atmosphere in the house changed. The children ran to her, their faces lighting up with joy. Chijioke stood by the door, waiting nervously. He had no idea what to expect, but he knew he had done his best. Ifeoma smiled as she entered, but her eyes were searching for something. Chijioke took a deep breath and stepped forward. He met her gaze and said the words that had been weighing on his heart for so long. "Ifeoma, I'm sorry. I see now how much you do. I appreciate you more than I can say. I promise to respect and support you, not just with my words, but with my actions." Ifeoma's eyes softened, and she placed her hand on his shoulder. "I know, Chijioke. And that's all I ever wanted." As Ifeoma stepped into the house, there was an undeniable shift in the air. The tension that had loomed for days now seemed to dissolve, replaced by a fragile hope. Chijioke stood there, his heart pounding in his chest. He had always prided himself on his strength, his ability to manage anything that came his way. But now, for the first time, he felt truly vulnerable. His pride had been shattered, and in its place was a deep, aching understanding of just how much Ifeoma meant to him. The kids rushed to Ifeoma, each one wanting to be the first to hug her, to shower her with love. It warmed Chijioke's heart to see how much she was loved by their children. They had missed her, and he could see the joy in their eyes as they clung to her. He watched as Ifeoma gently kissed each child on the forehead, her soft voice soothing their anxieties, and he realized how much of her energy and love went into making their family whole. Chijioke slowly walked over to where she was standing, the weight of his words hanging between them. He had promised to change, but now, he wasn't sure if that would be enough. Could he ever make up for the time he had taken her for granted? Would she truly believe that he understood the importance of her contributions? These thoughts swirled in his mind as he stood in the doorway, watching Ifeoma interact with their children. "Ifeoma," he finally said, his voice gentle but firm. "I know I can't undo the past, but I want to be better for you, for all of us. I see now just how much you do, how much you give, and how much you sacrifice. You deserve my respect, and I'm ready to show it in everything I do." Ifeoma turned to him, her eyes softening. "I can see you've made an effort, Chijioke. And that means a lot. But you have to remember that this is about more than just saying the right words. It's about showing up every day, giving your best, and being present emotionally and physically." Chijioke nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He had been present in body, but emotionally distant. He had been so caught up in his own struggles, in the pressures of his business, that he had failed to see the quiet strength Ifeoma had carried every single day. As they sat down for a meal together, the atmosphere in the house felt lighter. There was still a sense of discomfort, a tension that lingered between them, but it was different now. It wasn't the tension of unresolved arguments or anger, but the tension of two people trying to rebuild something fragile, something that had been taken for granted for far too long. That evening, Chijioke did his best to take charge of the house. He cleaned up after dinner, washed the dishes, and helped the kids with their homework. It wasn't easy, and he found himself exhausted by the end of the night. But for the first time in a long time, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not because he had completed tasks, but because he had truly contributed. He had shared the load that had always fallen on Ifeoma's shoulders, and in doing so, he felt closer to her. Ifeoma watched him with a quiet smile, appreciating the effort he was making. She could see the change in him, the way he was starting to see their life together as a partnership. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And that, she realized, was all she had ever wanted. The following days were a journey of small changes, but each one was significant. Chijioke made an effort to spend more time with the kids, to listen to their stories, and to give Ifeoma the space she needed to recharge. He took on more responsibilities at home, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He understood now that being a good husband wasn't just about financial provision, it was about being present, being supportive, and showing his love in every little action. Ifeoma, in turn, began to open up more. She was still cautious, but there was a spark in her eyes that Chijioke hadn't seen in a long time. She saw the effort he was making, and it gave her hope that they could rebuild their relationship. It wasn't about perfection, it was about progress, about learning and growing together. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Ifeoma sat down beside Chijioke on the couch. There was a quiet understanding between them, a shared sense of hope for the future. "I've seen the changes, Chijioke," Ifeoma said softly. "And I'm proud of you. But remember, this is just the beginning. We both have to keep working on ourselves, on our relationship. It's not easy, but I believe we can make it work." Chijioke took her hand in his heart swelling with gratitude. "I will, Ifeoma. I promise. I'll keep working, not just for you, but for us, for our family." And in that moment, they both understood that the road ahead would not always be easy. There would be challenges, there would be setbacks, but there would also be growth, love, and understanding. They had learned the hard way that respect and appreciation were the foundations of a strong relationship. And with that realization, they both felt ready to face whatever came next, together. As the weeks went by, the changes between Chijioke and Ifeoma became more apparent to everyone around them. Their friends and family noticed a shift, a sense of unity and understanding that hadn't been there before. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that made all the difference. One afternoon, Chijioke came home early from work, a rare occurrence. The sun was just beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a soft golden glow through the windows. He walked into the living room and saw Ifeoma sitting at her desk, a pen in her hand, her brow furrowed in concentration as she worked on one of her writing projects. The sight of her, so immersed in her work, made him smile. He remembered the days when he had taken her for granted, when he thought her writing was just something she did to pass the time. But now, he saw it differently. Her work, her passion, was a part of who she was, a part of what made her so incredible. He stood there for a moment, just watching her, feeling a sense of gratitude that he couldn't put into words. Finally, he walked over and gently touched her shoulder, startling her. "Oh, you're home early," Ifeoma exclaimed, looking up at him, her face lighting up with a warm smile. Chijioke smiled back, his heart swelling. "I thought I'd surprise you. I realized I haven't taken you out in a while." Ifeoma looked at him, her eyes searching his face. There was a sincerity in his gaze that she hadn't seen before. It wasn't just about taking her out to dinner, it was about showing her that he valued her, that he was willing to put in the effort to make her feel appreciated. "Chijioke," she said softly, "thank you for everything. I've noticed the changes, and I can see you're trying." "I'm not just trying, Ifeoma," Chijioke replied, his voice filled with emotion. "I'm committed. I want to be the man you deserve. I want to be the partner you've always needed, the father our children need. I can't promise I'll be perfect, but I can promise I'll keep working, day by day." Ifeoma's eyes filled with unshed tears, her heart overwhelmed by the words she had longed to hear. "I believe you," she whispered. "I do." They stood there for a moment, locked in each other's gaze, both of them understanding just how far they had come, and how much further they had to go. But in that moment, there was no fear, no doubt. There was only love, a love that had been tested but had emerged stronger than ever. That evening, Chijioke and Ifeoma went out for dinner. It was a simple meal at their favorite restaurant, but it felt different. It felt special, because it wasn't just about the food or the setting, it was about the connection they had rediscovered. They laughed together, shared stories, and talked about their dreams for the future. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. It was real. As they walked back to their car, hand in hand, Chijioke glanced over at Ifeoma, his heart swelling with affection. He knew that they still had a long way to go, but he also knew that they were on the right path. For the first time in a long time, he felt truly content. He had learned to appreciate what he had, and he was determined to never take it for granted again. When they returned home, the kids were already asleep, and the house was quiet. Chijioke and Ifeoma sat down on the couch together, their hands intertwined. There was no rush to talk, no need for words. They simply sat in the stillness, comfortable in each other's presence. "I'm proud of us," Ifeoma said quietly after a while, breaking the silence. Chijioke nodded. "I am too. We've come a long way." He leaned back, his eyes closed for a moment as he reflected on how far they had come. The journey hadn't been easy, and there were still moments of tension, of doubt. But there was also something deeper now, something more resilient. They had learned to appreciate each other in ways they hadn't before. As they sat there, together in the quiet of their home, Chijioke realized that the weight of pride he had carried for so long had finally been lifted. He had let go of the idea that he had to do everything on his own. He had learned that a marriage wasn't about one person shouldering all the burdens, it was about sharing the load, about working together to build something stronger than either person could alone. Ifeoma, too, had learned to let go of the fear that she would always be the one holding everything together. She had learned that it was okay to lean on her partner, to trust him with the things that mattered most. And together, they had learned that love wasn't just about the grand gestures or the easy moments, it was about the small things, the quiet moments, the everyday acts of care and respect. It was about showing up for each other, day in and day out, even when things weren't perfect. Chijioke squeezed Ifeoma's hand, his heart full. "We'll make it, Ifeoma. I know we will." "I know we will too," she replied softly. And with that, they sat together in the quiet of the night, their hearts at peace, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The weight of pride had been lifted, replaced by something far more valuable, respect, love, and the commitment to never take each other for granted again. As the days went by, Chijioke's newfound perspective started to change the atmosphere in their home. It wasn't always easy. There were days when he still struggled with old habits, when pride would try to sneak its way back in. But each time, he caught himself, remembering the lessons he had learned. He knew that change wasn't something that happened overnight, and he was willing to put in the work every single day. Ifeoma, too, noticed the change. She could see it in the way Chijioke interacted with her, in the way he looked at their children, in the way he took responsibility for things around the house. He no longer took her efforts for granted, and that made all the difference. It wasn't that he was perfect, far from it, but he was trying, and that effort spoke volumes. One afternoon, Ifeoma was in the kitchen, preparing dinner. The familiar hum of the stove and the soft chopping of vegetables filled the air. As she moved around the kitchen, Chijioke came in, his arms full of groceries. "Let me help," he said, setting the bags down on the counter. Ifeoma looked at him, surprised but pleased. "You're getting better at this," she said with a smile. Chijioke chuckled. "Well, I figured if I'm going to be a part of everything, I might as well start with the basics." He picked up a knife and began chopping onions with surprising precision. As they worked together in the kitchen, their movements syncing in quiet harmony, Ifeoma couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude. For the first time in a long time, it felt like they were truly a team, no longer divided by pride or misunderstandings, but united by mutual respect and love. It wasn't perfect, and there were still challenges to face, but there was something beautiful in the effort they were both making. Later that evening, as they sat down for dinner, Ifeoma noticed the joy in her husband's eyes. It wasn't just about the meal they were sharing, it was about the journey they had been on together. She realized that this was the most meaningful meal they had shared in a long time, not because of the food itself, but because of the love and understanding that had been put into it. As they ate, Chijioke looked across the table at Ifeoma, his gaze soft. I've been thinking, he began, about how much you do for this family. All the things I took for granted. I know I can't change everything in a day, but I want to do better. I want to be someone who supports you, not just in words, but in actions. Ifeoma smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. I appreciate that, Chijioke. I really do. But remember, we're in this together. We always have been. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, letting the weight of their words sink in. The kids were playing in the living room, their laughter echoing through the house. Chijioke and Ifeoma exchanged a look that said everything they had learned, everything they were still learning. They were a family, imperfect but whole, and they would keep growing together, no matter what. In the days that followed, life returned to a rhythm of sorts. Chijioke continued to put more effort into the home, stepping up in ways he never had before. Ifeoma, too, found herself more willing to lean on him, to ask for help when she needed it. They became partners in the truest sense, no longer weighed down by the misunderstandings that had once kept them apart. But the real test came one evening, a few weeks later. Ifeoma had been feeling under the weather for a few days, and her energy was low. Chijioke could see that she was struggling, but he also saw the familiar reluctance in her eyes, the reluctance to ask for help, to admit that she needed a break. He knew this was a moment where he could show her just how much he had changed. Ifeoma, he said gently, you've done so much for me and for this family. I know you've been running yourself ragged, and I want you to rest. Let me handle things for the next few days. Ifeoma looked at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. But there's so much to do, she said, her voice soft. I don't want to burden you. Chijioke shook his head. You're not a burden, Ifeoma. You never were. I want to do this for you, because you deserve it. Because you've given everything for this family, and it's time for me to step up. Ifeoma hesitated for a moment, but then she saw the determination in his eyes. Slowly, she nodded. Okay. I'll rest. But you promise me, Chijioke, you promise me you'll take care of everything. I promise, he said, his voice steady. For the next few days, Chijioke took over the household responsibilities. He managed the kids, cooked meals, cleaned, and even found time to help Ifeoma with her writing. He didn't complain, didn't make it a big deal. He did it because he knew it was the right thing to do, because he had learned to truly value everything his wife did for their family. Ifeoma, in turn, allowed herself to rest. She took naps, read books, and spent time reflecting on how far they had come. It wasn't easy for her to let go of control, but she realized that this was a partnership, a real partnership, and that it was okay to lean on her husband when she needed to. After a few days, Ifeoma was feeling better, and when she returned to her usual routine, she saw a noticeable change in their home. Chijioke wasn't just doing the chores out of obligation, he was doing them out of love. And that made all the difference. I can see it, Chijioke, Ifeoma said one evening as they sat together. I can see how much you've grown. How much you're trying. And I want you to know that I see you. I appreciate you. Chijioke smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. Thank you, Ifeoma, for believing in me. For giving me the chance to prove that I can be the partner you deserve. And in that moment, they both knew that they were stronger than they had ever been. They had weathered the storm of pride, and they had come out on the other side, hand in hand, ready to face whatever life threw their way. The weight of pride had been replaced by something far more valuable, mutual respect, understanding, and a love that was stronger than ever before. And as they moved forward, they knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Days turned into weeks, and life gradually returned to its new rhythm. Chijioke had found a balance between his business and his responsibilities at home. He was more present, not only physically but emotionally as well. He helped the children with their homework, made sure dinner was always on the table, and even found time to do small things that meant a lot to Ifeoma, like bringing her favorite flowers from the market. Ifeoma, too, found a renewed sense of purpose in her work. Her writing flourished as she now had more time to focus, no longer feeling the weight of managing the entire household by herself. But more importantly, her heart was lighter, knowing that she and Chijioke were working together as equals, as partners. But not all was smooth sailing. Life had a way of throwing curveballs, and the couple knew that this new chapter in their marriage was only the beginning of many challenges they would face together. One particular evening, as Chijioke was finishing up a particularly stressful week at work, he came home later than usual. Ifeoma was in the kitchen, preparing a meal for their family, but she was still visibly tired. "Are you okay?" Chijioke asked, noticing the exhaustion in her eyes. Ifeoma paused, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'm just tired, Chijioke. It's been a long week. The children have been a little more work lately, and I'm trying to finish up my latest project." Chijioke took a deep breath. He had learned a lot, but this was one of those moments where his true test would come. He could feel his old instincts kicking in, the need to provide, to handle everything. He could have offered her the usual reassurance, told her everything would be fine, and just walked away. But that's not what she needed. "Ifeoma, let me take care of the kids tonight. You rest. I'll finish dinner, too," he said, his voice soft but firm. Ifeoma hesitated for a moment. She was used to being the one who took care of everything. She had learned to juggle so many things, and it wasn't easy for her to ask for help even now. But she looked at Chijioke, saw the sincerity in his eyes, and knew that he meant it. "Okay," she said quietly. "But if you need help, just call me." Chijioke nodded and gently kissed her on the forehead. "No need. I've got this." As he sat down with the children to help them with their homework, Ifeoma retreated to the living room, sinking into the couch. She closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to simply breathe. She had become so accustomed to carrying the load on her own, to being the backbone of the family, that it was hard to let go. But here was her husband, stepping up in ways she had never imagined. It was a moment of quiet triumph for both of them. The evening passed smoothly. Chijioke helped the children finish their assignments, made sure they were bathed, and then served them dinner. By the time Ifeoma joined them at the table, she felt like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "This looks delicious," she said, smiling at the spread of food in front of her. "It's a work in progress," Chijioke grinned, "but I think I did alright." As they ate together, Ifeoma marveled at how far they had come. She had always known that Chijioke had potential, but this new side of him was something she had never expected. It was a quiet, everyday kind of greatness, one that didn't need applause, just effort and consistency. As they finished dinner, Chijioke turned to her, a thoughtful look in his eyes. "Ifeoma, I know I can never truly understand everything you've been through, but I want you to know that I see you. I see how hard you work, and I'm grateful. I don't want you to ever feel like you're alone in this." Ifeoma's heart swelled with emotion. She didn't know what she had expected from him, but this was more than she could have hoped for. "Thank you, Chijioke," she whispered, her voice full of gratitude. "I appreciate you more than you know." And just like that, a new understanding passed between them. They were partners, in every sense of the word. No longer separated by pride or misunderstanding, but bound together by love and respect. As the days turned into months, they continued to grow together. Their home was filled with laughter, understanding, and a sense of unity that had been absent before. They still had their challenges, as all families do, but they no longer let pride get in the way. They faced everything together, side by side. One day, as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset together, Chijioke took Ifeoma's hand in his. He looked at her, his eyes filled with appreciation. "I couldn't have asked for a better partner," he said softly. "Thank you for never giving up on me." Ifeoma smiled, squeezing his hand. "And thank you for showing me that we can always do better, that we can always grow. I love you, Chijioke." Chijioke kissed her hand gently. "I love you, too, Ifeoma. More than I could ever say." As the sun set behind them, the world seemed to stand still for a moment, and in that moment, everything felt right. The weight of pride had finally lifted, replaced by something far more beautiful, a deep, unshakable respect for one another. And together, they knew they could face whatever life had in store for them. As the days went on, Chijioke and Ifeoma continued to grow stronger together. Their relationship had transformed into something even more beautiful than before. They no longer allowed pride or misunderstandings to cloud their love. Instead, they cherished each other's contributions and worked hand in hand to create a home filled with peace, love, and respect. One evening, after the children had gone to bed and they were sitting together on the porch, Chijioke looked at Ifeoma with deep affection. "I know I've said it before, but I just want to say it again. Thank you for everything you do. You make this family whole." Ifeoma smiled softly, her heart full. "I couldn't do it without you, Chijioke. We're in this together. And that's the most important thing." The warm glow of the setting sun cast a golden light on their faces, and for the first time in a long while, they both felt truly at peace. Chijioke squeezed her hand. "I don't think I could have asked for a better partner. Thank you for showing me that it's never too late to learn, and that love means appreciating the little things." Together, they sat in silence, watching the sunset as it painted the sky with colors of hope and renewal. It was in these quiet moments that they realized how much they had grown, not just as individuals, but as a couple. As they reflected on their journey, they knew that their love would continue to deepen. And with every new chapter, they would be there for each other, always. And with that, the story comes to an end. If you enjoyed this story, remember to hit that subscribe button for more heartfelt tales like this one. Don't forget to share it with your friends, and stay tuned for more amazing stories here on Storytime with African Tales. See you in the next one.